Here's a belief worth challenging. Somewhere along the way, we decided that exercise had to happen outside to count, that fat loss required fresh air, a sidewalk, and ideally some photogenic scenery. That if you couldn't get out the door, you might as well not bother. It's an understandable assumption. It's also, from a metabolic standpoint, completely wrong. Your body doesn't know if you're on a mountain trail or in your living room. It doesn't have a GPS. It doesn't check the weather. What it responds to is a signal. A specific, measurable, reproducible physiological signal that tells your cells conditions are safe, fuel demand is steady, open the fat reserves. And that signal can be generated anywhere, even indoors, even without equipment, even on the worst Tuesday of February. That signal has a name. It's called Zone 2. Zone 2 is not a workout philosophy or a wellness trend. It's a specific and well-defined metabolic state. Your heart rate rises moderately. Your breathing deepens but stays controlled. You could speak in short sentences if someone asked you a question, but you wouldn't want to give a speech. You're working, but your body doesn't interpret that work as a threat. And in that calm, something extraordinary begins to happen deep inside your cells. To understand what makes Zone 2 so specifically powerful against visceral fat, you need to zoom in. Inside your muscle cells live your mitochondria. You've probably heard them called the powerhouses of the cell, which is accurate, but undersells them considerably. They are, more precisely, the decision makers of your metabolism. And like any decision maker, what they choose depends entirely on the conditions they're operating in. Under high-intensity conditions, when cortisol is elevated and the body reads the situation as a crisis, mitochondria deprioritize fat. Fatty acids are slow to process. They require oxygen, time, and a relatively relaxed biochemical environment. When the alarm is sounding, there's no time for that. The body reaches for glucose instead, burning it fast and dirty to meet the immediate demand. But in Zone 2, the alarm stays off. The demand is real but manageable, and in that steady, sustained, non-threatening environment, mitochondria do something remarkable. They shift their preference. They begin prioritizing fatty acids over glucose, pulling directly from fat stores, including, over time, those deep visceral deposits wrapped around your organs. This is called mitochondrial training, and it matters far beyond the single workout. Because when you train your mitochondria consistently in Zone 2, you're not just burning fat in the moment, you're reprogramming the preference itself. You're building a metabolism that reaches for fat first, even at rest, burning more efficiently across every hour of the day. Now layer in what we know about visceral fat specifically. Visceral fat is not ordinary fat. It's metabolically active in ways that subcutaneous fat, the kind you can pinch, is not. It functions almost like a dysfunctional organ, secreting inflammatory compounds, disrupting insulin signaling, and responding with particular sensitivity to stress hormones. When cortisol spikes, visceral fat doesn't just refuse to release its stores. It actively accumulates more. It treats stress as a signal to dig in deeper. This is why brutal, high-intensity training, despite burning significant calories, often fails to make a meaningful dent in visceral fat. The harder you push, the louder the cortisol alarm, and the tighter that biological vault locks. Zone 2 sidesteps this entirely. It creates a biological safety signal, calm effort, sustained demand, no crisis detected. And in that signal, visceral fat finally receives the metabolic conditions it needs to begin releasing its stores. The question then becomes, how do you generate that signal when you can't get outside? Here's the part where the science becomes practical. Your body responds to the signal, not the location. Zone 2 is a heart rate state, a breathing state, a metabolic state, and it can be reached through any movement that elevates your heart rate into that 50 to 70% window and holds it there steadily. Which means you have more options than you might think. The first is the stationary bike. Of all the indoor options, this one offers the most precise control. Resistance can be adjusted in small increments, making it the easiest tool for dialing your heart rate into the exact Zone 2 window and holding it there without spikes or drops. The second is slow jumping jacks. Not the frantic gym class version, deliberately slowed down to roughly half the normal tempo, Slow jumping jacks create a gentle, rhythmic, full-body stimulus that elevates heart rate without spiking it. The key is the intentional reduction of pace. Fast is not the goal. Sustained is. Third, invisible rope skipping. Light, rhythmic hopping in place, as if a jump rope were passing beneath your feet, but without the rope. It sounds almost too simple. The metabolic effect is not. The continuous, low-impact rhythm generates a steady aerobic stimulus that slots neatly into Zone 2 for most people. Fourth, low step-ups. Using a single stair, a low box, or even a thick boot, the step-up is a surprisingly effective Zone 2 tool when performed slowly and continuously. The critical word is low. The moment the step height increases significantly, the intensity spikes out of the target zone. Fifth, slow high knee marching. Intentional, deliberate walking in place with exaggerated knee lifts. This is not jogging. It's marching. The core engages. The hip flexors work. The heart rate rises. And because there's no impact force, it's gentle on joints while still generating the sustained aerobic demand Zone 2 requires. Sixth, the Zone 2 mini circuit. This is the rotation approach, cycling slowly between movements like gentle squats, side steps, slow arm circles, and light marching to prevent any single muscle group from fatiguing while keeping overall heart rate steady. It's the most accessible option for people who find sustained repetition mentally difficult, and it produces the same metabolic signal when paced correctly. None of these require a gym. None require equipment beyond what most households already contain. All of them, done at the right pace, for a sustained duration of roughly 30 to 60 minutes, generate the Zone 2 signal. And that signal, repeated consistently over weeks and months, builds the mitochondrial empire that quietly dismantles visceral fat from the inside out. Here's where most people make a mistake that costs them months of motivation. They use the scale, and when the scale doesn't move fast enough, they conclude the effort isn't working. They quit, and they miss what's actually happening. Zone 2 training, particularly in its early weeks, is remodeling your metabolism from the inside. Mitochondria are multiplying. Fat oxidation pathways are being rebuilt. Insulin sensitivity is improving. Visceral fat is beginning, slowly and quietly, to release its stores. None of this shows up cleanly or immediately on a bathroom scale. What does show up, if you know where to look, is this. Your waist circumference begins to shrink. Not because you've lost weight necessarily, but because visceral fat, the deep kind wrapped around your organs, is specifically what's being reduced. A tape measure around the waist is a more honest reporter of visceral fat loss than any scale. Your breathing endurance improves. The activity that left you slightly winded at 20 minutes starts feeling manageable at 40. This is mitochondrial expansion. More furnaces, better oxygen utilization, greater aerobic capacity. You're literally becoming more efficient. Your resting heart rate begins to drop. Gradually, over weeks, your heart needs fewer beats per minute to do the same work. This is one of the clearest objective markers of cardiovascular improvement available without a lab. And your energy stabilizes. The midday crashes soften. The cravings become less urgent. Because when your mitochondria are trained to burn fat efficiently, your body has access to a vastly larger and more stable fuel supply than glucose alone can provide. Blood sugar swings diminish. The afternoon slump that once felt inevitable starts to feel optional. These are the metrics of a metabolism being rebuilt. They're quieter than a number on a scale. They're also more real. Every session is a message, a biological communique sent from your conscious decision to move to the deep cellular machinery that determines how your body handles fuel, stress, inflammation, and fat. The message isn't complicated. It says, we're safe. The work is steady. Open the furnaces. Release the reserves. Your visceral fat evolved to respond to scarcity and crisis. It did not evolve to handle calm, consistent, sustained effort. That is its vulnerability. And Zone 2, whether you access it on a trail at dawn or in your living room on a rainy afternoon, is precisely the key that fits the lock. You don't need perfect conditions to send a perfect signal. You need 30 minutes, a small amount of space, and a heart rate that stays quietly, stubbornly, productively in the green. The vault is not waiting for better weather. Neither should you.